Hi there, my name is Reto Meier, and I'm usually joined on the App Clinic by Ni-Lewis, but the preparation for this week's show required us to do some intense physical exercise in order to properly test personal fitness apps Endomondo, Runtastic and Runkeeper. We chose to test these apps hiking. Now, back in Australia we call hiking walking, but folks in California seem to be more inclined to drive if they're going anywhere further than the nearest car park. But in any case, the last time I saw Ian was deep in the backwoods of the Big Basin National Park. Anyway, find out what features and technical tips and tricks it takes to make a killer personal fitness app today on the App Clinic. So one of the big benefits of living in the Bay Area is that there's really a limitless supply of hiking trails all within a really short drive. Now, being a certified practicing geek, the only thing more fun than hiking through the wilderness is tracking my route while doing so. So all three of today's apps will let me do that, and a few other things as well. So all three of today's apps support a standard set of functionality, which is what I've put up here. Now they're all designed to allow you to track a workout, and in this case they're optimized for something running related. Basically any exercise which can be measured through a combination of the distance you've traveled and the amount of time it's taken. Now accordingly, they measure the duration of your workout and the distance traveled and use that to work out things like your pace, average speed, calories burned, water consumed, all of those sorts of things. And they also use the GPS information that they track throughout your workout to display your route on a map. And each of the apps shows a slightly different set of details on the map and in fact in terms of your workout, and I'll go through each of those as we look at the apps in a little more detail. They each also allow you to select the activity that you're doing and choose from a selection of different workouts. So that could be running, jogging, rowing, cycling, push-ups, whatever you like. And there's different styles of workouts as well. So it can be a one-off, a time trial versus your friends, any number of different workout styles. And again, I'll show you what some of these apps have to offer as we go through them in detail. So taking these features as a baseline, as a given, this is basically what your personal fitness tracking app needs to have in order to be in the game. Let's take a look at some of the features that can really help differentiate those apps from their competitors. So this is my wish list of things that I'd like to see in personal fitness apps. So there's a bunch of stuff on this list that's totally in the nice to have territory. So things like a rich tablet experience and analytics are the sort of thing that can really lift an app well beyond its competitors, well beyond sort of what you would expect from an app, which is really going to help you win over fans, win over users, which are going to be coming back to your app and really become addicted to it. But let's face it, these features are the sorts of things which people aren't going to notice straight away. They're going to require a certain amount of discovery. Now, why is that important? Well, as it happens, I was hiking in Rancho San Antonio a couple of weeks ago when my wife asked me if there was a way that we could track how far we were going and how long we would be hiking for. And I thought, you know what? There's probably some apps to help with that. So I jumped straight onto our suggestions on the Trello board and installed the first three apps that were there, and that is in fact the three apps which we're looking at today. Now the factors that I used to decide which app we were going to actually keep running was how quickly it let me get started with the confidence that it was going to record everything that I wanted it to. So a quick startup and an intuitive, dare I say, obvious controls were really critical. So the overall look and feel were really important here as well. I opened each app and literally spent 5 seconds looking at each of them before I chose which one I was going to go with. So that gives you a really good idea of just how important it is to make that great first impression. I'm not alone in the way that I look at my apps. People will just download them and figure, well, which of these three am I going to use? This one kind of looks like it's the best, so they're going to go with it. So in the end, for me, I ended up choosing Endomondo. So they've got a beautiful feature page here, which has a perfectly distinctive icon. Now it doesn't necessarily say too much about the app, but it's quite clear that you're not going to mistake that icon for anything else, anyone else's icon. And it fits in really nice into their bigger logo as well. So it's a really good example. So we really got off onto the right foot here. I looked at this and thought, this looks legit. This looks like an app that people have spent a little bit of time and effort on. So let's jump ahead here. So when you open up the app, what you get is this really well-designed home screen. It's totally intuitive. It leaves me with absolutely no question as to what I need to do to get started. There's a giant green start button that draws your attention straight away, and is a great example of when and how to create custom controls within your app. The rest of the app looks pretty standard. They've got a clean white design with a standard action bar, and what I really like about this design is its simplicity. The layout isn't cluttered. You have 3 pieces of information about your workout visible at any time, along with the exercise that you're planning to do and the workout style that you're planning to engage in. There's even a hint of a map poking out along the bottom corner, and if I switch to the giant phone, I can show you a couple of other nice features of the app. All right, giant phone, excellent. So if we, I'm going to switch to the other side here because my cables aren't long enough. So if I fire up Endomondo, you can see here that if we don't choose not to go pro, so I didn't install the pro version here simply because I didn't use the pro version when I was using the app on the road. I'm going to try and unplug this and plug it back in. Hopefully it all will stop flickering. Or it'll go away entirely. One of the two. Oh, there we go. Still flickering. What do you think, Daniel? Anything we can do here, or just persevere?
Why don't you persevere for a second? I'm going to see if... Actually, I'm going to go right over there and try to mess with the connection really quick. Just give me 10 seconds.
Sure. Well, I will talk, and I'm going to stand in front of the giant. No, it's going to be pretty annoying, but nonetheless, what you'll find, in fact, if I jump a step back, that's going to make it easier for us. And if you want to just switch that off for a second. So you can see straight away that the layout isn't clustered, and what we've got here is alongside each of the options on the screen, you can see that there's a little drop down, which is in fact going to allow you, it gives you a hint that clicking on any of them is actually going to do something. It's going to let you choose your options differently. And this is really useful because straight away it gives me hints as to how I'm going to be able to use this app in the right way. So straight away, sort of, you know that clicking on stuff is going to give me options to change things. And in fact, that's exactly how it works. And so if I click on any of those options, what I get straight away is a list of alternative things that I can look at. So whether that be looking at calories consumed rather than distance traveled, or any of those sorts of options. And the same thing goes for the workout style and the workout activity that I'm planning to do. Right away you're able to choose, click the drop down and see, oh, actually I'm rowing. And when I click on those, I actually get nice big full screen activities rather than pop-ups. And this is kind of important because it makes it really simple for me to be able to make those choices without being overly distracted, which is really, really useful. And that's really the way that the whole UI design for the app works, is that it's really intuitive, it's really fast to get started, which is a real benefit. So I'm going to spin this around, and if we hold it real tight, it looks like it gets...
Yeah, I think it's the movement on the device.
Movement on the device.
A little bit.
Know.
It's the issues with MHL. So if there are any Miracast OEMs out there that are producing products which are Miracast compatible, get on it so we can start using Nexus 4 to do our demos.
Exactly. All right, so that's hugely disappointing that that's working out that way, but nonetheless, I will continue on. We do have screenshots for most of it. So the other important thing is that there's, let's just kill that because that's just way too annoying. So again, it's really important that you're likely to be using this app outside in direct sunlight when you're in a hurry, so you really don't want to have to read small text and hit small touch targets. You want everything to be as simple and easy to use as possible. And basically everything in the app goes along those lines. It's really simple to use, really straightforward to be able to select different elements within the UI, which is great. Wow, it seems that our technical difficulties have scared off most people, which is a shame, but nonetheless. So that's basically how everything goes. One of the nice touches as well that we had, and if I drop back to this screen, you'll see up the top there is in fact a little menu item, or a little action item, I should say, which is going to allow you to start a music player. Now in this case, it's going to start up Google Music. Now, one of the really nice things about this is that you can do this in your app, and this makes a lot of sense, right? Because a lot of the times when you are going to be using an app like this, it's going to be while you're exercising. You're going to want to listen to music. This is pretty common. So having a quick link to a music player is a really useful, a really nice touch. And you can do this by creating an intent to launch a music player like this. Note that it's changed slightly in Ice Cream Sandwich, and you can see both of the options on screen here. Now note that this doesn't specifically launch Google Music. The launch intent doesn't specify a particular music player. Any app that's capable of playing, browsing, or manipulating music files stored on the device can specify the category app music in its manifest and be presented as an option when this intent is fired. So if you're building a music player, that's something you may want to consider when building your app. Now let's take a look at the next app that I installed, which is Runkeeper from FitnessKeeper. Now they've taken the approach of using their feature graphic to display their app name and logo. Now it's perfectly reasonable, but it lacks the punch of something more representative of their brand rather than just the branding itself. Now the biggest roadblock for me was the 5 touches it took to get from my launcher to the main screen. Now that's a lot of work to do to get to the point where I can decide if I even want to use the app. Now when I did get to the home screen, I felt a little like I'd walked into a time warp with old style tabs and a title bar. Now in fairness, it turns out that Runkeeper has a new beta, so I'm going to switch to that, which hopefully I took a screenshot of, but I apparently didn't. Now their new design is definitely more modern. It's very much the same navigation as you can see here, but they've replaced the tabs with a view pages style tab pager. They've got an action bar. Now unfortunately it looks like a view page but doesn't swipe, so that's one of the most important things that they need to do to create that consistency, is make sure that they can swipe between tabs. And that's kind of the story for their entire redesign, is that it's not really a change in the app, it's just cosmetic. So I would definitely suggest that they take this opportunity to rethink some of the navigation, some of the structure of the app, as well as just the raw cosmetics. So because at the moment the layout and navigation is pretty much unchanged. And in terms of data and functionality provided on the main screen, it's actually pretty similar to what Endomondo has, with a couple of really important differences. Now, before I start exercising, there's no indication of what information I'll get. Will it be mapped? Will it be recorded? Will it be recording the time or distance? I really don't see any of that before I get started. And that really makes me reluctant to get started in my exercise, knowing that I really don't know what's going to happen, how much of what I want to be recorded is going to be. And a lot of users are like me and they'll install a bunch of options all at once before jumping in and seeing what each has to offer. So as a result, it's important that you give potential users as clear a picture of what you offer without them having to do anything. Now they've also put a lot of emphasis on how I'm receiving my location, and the input type is the first thing I'm presented with. And 99% of the time that's going to be GPS, and probably consolidated with Wi-Fi and Cell ID if that's accurate enough. In practice, for an app like this, you're going to want to listen for every location update that comes through, using a pattern a lot like this one, as described in the Location Strategies API Guide section, maintaining a current best estimate. This is going to let you listen for updates from every location source, after which you can determine the most likely current position. This is really important for apps like these, where a few small offsets for a few small seconds can turn a 10-mile jog into a 100-mile odyssey. And you know what I mean? You've all seen someone's hilarious social media post with a massive spike in distance where they appear to have jogged across a river or up a mountain range thanks to some GPS reflection error. So don't be the punchline to a joke. Try and sanity check all of your location results so that your users are able to get the best possible location at any given time. Now otherwise the app works in much the same way. You hit start, stop. One of the strange things is once you hit stop, you get prompted as to whether or not you want to save your results. Now that should be a given. You should always save anything the user does and give them an option to delete something rather than an option to save it. The other thing I noticed is that they have map pins which look strikingly similar to the ones in iOS, which in and of itself isn't a problem, except that it looks a little bit weird on an Android device. To have these pins which look like they come from a different operating system. One good piece of news for this app, which I really liked, is that it does send everything to a server without you having to log in. Now, logging into the other apps was actually a real hassle. It took a lot of time and effort, having to exchange credentials, create accounts, send email addresses, all this sort of stuff, whereas here it auto syncs without me having to do anything, which is actually a really nice touch. Now, while I was navigating around this app, I actually noticed a couple of strange artifacts. And one is the way that they're using a web view to present a lot of their screens, and that in and of itself is perfectly fine. There's no problem with that. But the implementation of the way that they've done it is making the zoom controls become visible at various times. Now, you can make sure that you turn off both the built-in zoom controls and the visibility of the on-screen zoom, the ability to pinch zoom as well as the ability to zoom using the controls by turning off the zoom controls. That should be enough to make it all go away. But if you hit both of these methods here, then that will definitely make sure that there are no ability for the user to zoom on a display which you've clearly designed not to zoom. Another strange artifact is this modal dialog that tells me that my GPS result is pretty crappy. Now, I don't want to see this unless it's preventing the app from being able to do what it needs to do. So you really don't want to pop it up unless I've already hit the start button, and definitely not randomly while I'm just navigating the app. Now, last but certainly not least, let's take a look at Runtastic. Now, leaving the strange capitalization choices that they've made aside, they've got a pretty good landing page on Google Play. Like Endomondo, they've used a feature graphic that immediately makes you feel like you understand the purpose of the product and the sorts of people that they're marketing towards. And their logo and icon is pretty good, though I would really love to see them lose that rounded rectangle and choose a more distinctive silhouette. And if you kind of look at it, you can see that maybe even as simple as removing the blue, so you've just got the running man on the black ribbon, would look kind of awesome and definitely distinctive. So that's something that you guys may want to consider. Now, once we get to the main screen, we can see that it's actually pretty similar to Endomondo, which is great. Clearly there is a best practice here, which I think a lot of these apps are going to move towards. Straight away, we can see what we'll be recording, and there's a big green button to let me know to get started. And as a bonus, Runtastic also displays details like the sunrise sunset time, the current weather forecast, temperature, all of which is a really nice bonus. And in fact, those extra details are also included in my workout data. So I can see whether it was sunny, cloudy, hot, cold as I did each workout, which I think is a really nice touch and provides a little bit more context for your daily workout. And they've included them on screen here in a way that isn't overly intrusive, which is always a nice touch. So the functionality provided on the main page is really similar, but they've made a couple of specific design choices which I think risks users falling into the, you're holding it wrong trap, which is something you always want to avoid. So the main thing you'll notice here is that there's no obvious indication of what your touch targets are. And in fact, as soon as I started touching things on the screen, I tended to get it wrong. So I'd hit each of the different like duration time things to try and get like pace or calories or anything like that, and nothing happened. And so it's not until you try and hit the smallest touch target on the entire UI, the tiny cog in the middle, that you get that functionality. You hit that and then you're able to modify them. And again, what that does is pops up a really, really small bar which of icons which lets you choose which of the different settings that you want to view. So again, it's tiny, tiny touch targets which don't tell you that they are. And this can be a real problem because I'm using this app while I'm stretching, while I'm jogging, preparing to start my exercise regime. You really want to have things be big, easy to touch, and obvious to know what you're going to touch. And it's kind of the same thing here once you get down to the workout type and activity type. It's not obvious that they're buttons. You click on them and it pops up a dialogue with small text in closely spaced. And you really want to make sure that that's easy for people to use and easy for people to navigate. And it's the same with the big green go button. It's clearly a button, but it's not actually an Android button. So all of these things taken together really puts you in a situation where you're having to think before you can use the app. You're having to figure out, how do I get it to do the things that I want it to do? And for an app like this, where you want people to be able to get started quickly and easily, that can be a real problem. So once we get going, they've again made a really interesting choice, and unfortunately I can't show it to you right now, but once you start your workout, you actually have to unlock the screen before you're able to do anything. And in fact, if you don't, so if you just try and hit the pause or stop button on your workout, you get a toast that pops up saying, you're doing it wrong. You have to unlock the screen first. Now, I didn't even notice, excuse me, I didn't even notice that the first time that I went to stop a workout. I just hit stop, turned off the screen, and when I opened up the app later on, I noticed that it was still going. Now, a good tip for UX in general is that if you're using a toast to tell your users that they should have done something else when they did what they did, you're probably one doing it wrong rather than them. So it's really important to figure out how users are actually using your app and make sure that you optimize for that. In this case, they've made the assumption that the most likely thing that may happen is a user will accidentally stop something on the screen. Now, for most users, chances are they will just turn the screen off when they don't want to touch anything. So they're better off relying on the phone than having something built into your app. Okay, so once we finish the workout, the experience is pretty great. From this point onwards, I probably prefer Runtastic to Endomondo. The contextual information you get around things like weather, relative speed, the way that they display your speed along your track on the map is really great. Though there is an option there to choose between save and done once you've finished a workout, which is a little bit confusing. As I said before, saving should have already happened. It should just be a case of, yes, I've finished reviewing this, let me go back to the main screen. And another comment I had is that their settings screen is really complex. Again, you're sort of in this pattern of having to really read a lot of text to figure out how to do stuff, which is something you should try and avoid in apps like this. Now, the next few points apply to more than just Runtastic, so I want to make sure that the shame gets applied broadly, and the credit where it's due as well. But I think what we're trying to focus on here on the App Clinic is ways that you can improve your app. So we're going to try and highlight a couple of the things which could be done perhaps a little bit better. Now, first off, both Runtastic and Endomondo have a little surprise waiting in their overflow menu. It is in fact an exit button. Now, those of you who know me know that my initial reaction to seeing an exit button is something a lot like this. I chose not to destroy our studio room once again to make a point. And in fact, you can find my full thoughts on exit buttons in Android apps and why they shouldn't exist by watching Table Flip on YouTube, where I lay out exactly why this anti-pattern fills me with an impenetrable darkness. But in some ways, I guess I get it. These apps represent kind of a special case. They should definitely keep running while they're in the background, and they all do use notifications to let us know that that's exactly what's happening. So, given that, they have two choices to figure out what the right use case is. Both of them involve getting rid of something called exit. So they need to decide if they're more like turn-by-turn navigation or if they're more like a music player. Now, for the sake of argument, I'm going to say that they should be more like music players, which really means that I only want to see a notification. I only want to have the app continue to run in the background while I'm doing a workout. So as soon as I hit play or start, then by all means, pop up the notification, start an ongoing service, make sure that the app doesn't go away. But then as soon as I hit stop, as soon as my workout is finished, then I want the app to behave just as any other app. So hitting home or hitting back out of the app should take it out of memory, should stop GPS updates, and just basically give me my phone back as though the app was never running. At the moment, you have this tendency of, like, I've just opened the app, checked it out, hit home, and I have this icon saying, or this notification saying, hey, actually, it's still running. And that's not a great user experience. I don't want to have to figure out how to make it stop. I already did make it stop by ending my workout. While we're talking about notifications, I think there's really a fantastic opportunity to make these notifications even more useful. Now, at the moment, all three of the apps have a simple click here to return to the app text within their notification. And why not be a little bit more adventurous? I'd love to see rich notifications with actions that let me pause or end my workout directly from the notification shade. And I'd also love to see some more details on my workout here. Things like duration, distance traveled, basically anything that I've selected to look at on the app home screen, why not stick it in the notification as well? I think that really will present a really rich experience for your users. And in fact, when we looked at stopwatch apps just a few weeks ago, we saw a few examples of rich notifications being used to great effect. where you could basically use the entire stopwatch app without actually having to launch the app. The other thing missing from all three apps was a tablet layout. In fact, only Runkeeper even supported the option of using the app in landscape mode. Now, I know that these apps were originally created with the thought of having a fitness companion on your phone. And I'm sure no one really imagines strapping an Nexus 7 to your arm as you go jogging. But what about if you're using it at the gym, or if you're using it rowing? Then suddenly a tablet isn't quite as ridiculous an option. Now, step one is creating a great responsive design that means that the app will work great on whatever device I happen to be using, no matter what the orientation or screen size. So that's where I'd start. Really just make sure that I can use the app in a way that doesn't frustrate me on a tablet device. Step two is creating a great tablet-specific experience. Now, even if I'm not planning to take my Nexus 10 rowing, I'd love to go through my workouts while I'm sitting on my couch not working out. Whether that's reviewing the tracks I've run, analyzing the data, sort of doing all that stuff to figure out what is my fitness level, all of that stuff will be fantastic to do directly on a tablet. And in fact, that's one of the things that Mint.com discovered when they created an optimized tablet experience. It turns out that tablet users are more deeply engaged and more likely to spend time within the app. So Mint responded by creating a richer experience specifically for tablet users, designed around data analysis rather than data entry. So whereas on the Mint phone app, you'd go through and actually put in all of your purchase, keep track of your budget, within the tablet app, you would be able to go through and see exactly where you'd been spending money and do that deep analysis. And I think that there's really an opportunity for these apps to do something similar to drive their user engagement and really get people addicted to their service. So before we sign off, let's take a quick look at the prescriptions that we have for each app to help them move towards a pure Android experience. So we'll start off with Endomondo. So first off, kill the exit button. It should keep running only while we're tracking a workout. They've actually got kind of a bug. So I made a note to say that they have an issue with their navigation drop-down list on their homepage where that it doesn't have a drop-down icon to tell you it's a list. Now, as it happens, that doesn't seem to be the case on all devices, so that's just a bug to take a look at. Similarly, the settings that you've got within the navigation drop-down should be in the overflow menu rather than within the activities, within the main activities navigation. No tablet view, force portrait. Please don't ever force portrait mode. I would like to use my tablet in landscape mode, and as soon as you lock it to portrait, I feel like you're basically saying you can't use this app on the device that you're using. And it's a 7 meg download. I'm not entirely sure why it's a 7 meg download. That seems like a lot for what the app is doing. So maybe consider what you're packaging in there and how many of those assets you need to have on the device. In terms of Runtastic Pro, 10 meg download. Seriously? Why are these apps so big? It feels like you could drop a lot of that without having to lose a lot of the assets that you're using. The fact that it takes 5 clicks to get to the beginning of the app the first time you run it is a real turnoff. Every time I have to click the button again, I'm that much more tempted to just hit back, go to the Play Store and download something faster. You want to update your UI a little bit. There's some iPhone-y looking buttons which just kind of look out of place on Android. And same exit button, same as Endomondo. Please get rid of the exit button. The settings screen and the overall UI isn't as intuitive as it could be. I mean, it's a great app. It has a lot of the features that I really want to see. It just feels like I have to do a bit too much work to be able to use it. Build a tablet mode would be fantastic. Again, don't lock me into portrait if you don't have to. And yeah, maybe see if you can do something about the logo. I think you're like 90% of the way there with something awesome. You could just get rid of the rounded corners and suddenly you've got something which would be a really distinctive and really great Android logo. And finally, Runkeeper. So here, it's great to see that you guys are doing a UI overhaul to bring in some of those new patterns like action bar. I definitely think it's an opportunity for you to maybe look a little bit more deeply into the structure of the app and the navigation, but it's definitely heading along the right path, so keep that up. Do get rid of that modal dialog for missing location. That is just death. And the menu button of shame, which is actually a full-blown menu button of shame, clicking it does nothing. So make sure that goes away as part of your redesign. It also takes like 3 or 4 clicks to go from opening the app to being able to do anything. So again, try and speed up that first user flow from downloading it from Google Play and running it the first time should be as quick as possible. So that's all for us today. Apologies for the technical snafus, which meant we couldn't do any of the live stuff, but I think hopefully we were able to share most of the information that we intended to. Don't forget to tune in to Roman, Nick and Adam for Android Design in action on Tuesday, where they'll be setting their design skills loose on some of the apps that we looked at today, hopefully. There will be no App Clinic next week. It's celebrating Turkey Day here in the US, and we're going to be spending some time trying to find and rescue Ian from the backwoods, hopefully with a minimum number of his limbs sawn off with a pocket knife. When we're back, device profile apps will be up on the table. We'll be looking at apps like Tasker and NFC Task Launcher. So if you've got a device profile app that you'd like us to take a look at, be sure to hit our Trello page at bit.ly/appclinictrello and get your votes and nominations in. I'm going to quickly throw a question over to Dan, find out if there are any questions or comments from folks on any of the feeds which need to be responded to.
So we have two questions. The first one is what's the best way to integrate social aspects into these types of apps? Go ahead, and I'll ask the second one later.
Sure. So that's actually a good question, and something which I didn't touch on, but at least two of the apps, Endomondo and Runtastic, both have deep integration with social features. Now they've done it a pretty good way, and you can see that a lot of people will share their workouts via things like Facebook and Twitter, and likewise, Endomondo has the ability to actually cheer your friends on or compete against them. And I think these are all really rich uses of social, using your social circles. It's been proven, in fact, that with things like anything goal setting, particularly things like exercise, having people hold you accountable is a really great way of being able to help motivate you and keep your willpower up. So I think the key to social integration here on a philosophical level is to find ways to help you be accountable to your friends and create something competitive with people, which is always a real help when it comes to things like fitness. In terms of practical implementation details, I think the key is really to try and make it as smooth a path as possible. So whatever social network you're choosing to integrate with, you want to make sure that that sign-in flow is as smooth as possible. Like I said, I actually had some trouble creating an account on Endomondo, and I want this to be as much of a one-click process as possible. So whether that's signing into Facebook, Twitter, G+, or anything else which provides you with some of the functionality you need, you really want to try and make that process as smooth as possible, and ideally make sure it doesn't block. So I want to be able to use the app with no social features and with no account, and then see the reasons why hooking this into my social network would be beneficial. And then once you've done that, you want to make sure as well that you're not doing anything obnoxious. Make sure that you always give the users an option as to whether they want to share something on their social network or not. And in fact, one of the apps, I believe it was Runtastic, has a share icon, but it doesn't actually let you share anything unless you're logged in. And that's something you want to avoid as well. It's great to have the social features built in directly to those websites if you can, just to lower the friction. But even if I haven't chosen to sign in with Facebook, I still want to be able to share it using any of the apps that I have installed, which may include things like Facebook, Twitter, or G+. So you want to make sure that you don't limit yourself just to those tight integrations, and make sure that just standard sharing across regular Android intent-based sharing works as well.
Cool. And the last question that we have is, have any of the apps that we've reviewed on the App Clinic made it to pure Android yet?
So, good news on that. We have been spending some time going through the apps which we have looked at, and we have looked at a lot of apps over the last year. So it's taken us a bit of time, but we have, I think, 2 or 3 candidates which we're just going through now within the team to make sure that we're all satisfied with, and we'll hopefully have something to announce in the week after Thanksgiving. So not this week, but the week after. We will hopefully be inducting the first of our apps into the pure Android App Clinic collection. All right, so thank you very much for watching, everyone. That's all we've got time for today. Join us in a couple of weeks for the next episode of the App Clinic. Until then, I'm Reto Meier, and this has been the App Clinic. Thank you for watching.